Can you trust me? Do you trust your friends, your family, your coworkers, your boss? What about your country? Does the trust relationship between peoples affect the way that they communicate with each other? Does it influence how much we're willing to say, how open and honest we're willing to be, how trusting we can be in what we share? And if we look closely at how trust is a vital element in the way that we can communicate with each other, then it begs the question, where Agile is so interested in communications, is trust important in an Agile culture? And how does this relate to AI? Talking about machines, what does it mean to trust a machine? Can there be trust? Should there be trust? These are the questions that we're going to explore. Let's have a chat about that and see how trust fits into the Agile AI workplace. Hello and welcome. This is Agile for AI, and I'm Sean, your host. We really appreciate you spending time with me today. And I look forward to sharing with you some of the experiences that I've had in my Agile journey that have brought so much benefit into my life with the hope that they will benefit you. I look forward to hearing your thoughts, your opinions, and invite you to join in the comments so that we can have a conversation after the chat. So, with that said, let's dive right in. Let's figure out how trust factors into Agile and Agile culture. We mentioned before the importance of context, establishing context when we're communicating. The context determines how people listen to what we are saying, the words that we're saying. It significantly shifts the possible interpretations, the connotations of the words that we use. Words in themselves do not carry an intrinsic meaning. They are shaped, they're tainted by the context under which we deliver the message. So I've already talked about how context is so critical to good communications. Today, I want to talk about how trust is also a critical element, and perhaps one of the most important ones in Agile culture, because it's foundational to everything that we build on top of trust. Where there is trust, it enables us to do certain things, and where there isn't trust, it inhibits us from doing other things. Trust exists at all levels in all of our relationships. It doesn't matter who it is, where people are in the organization, even amongst friends and personal relationships, trust exists everywhere. And when it doesn't exist, it influences the interactions that we have with people. In the specific context of work, I want to take a look at the origins of the current atmosphere in the workplace. There's this concept of theory X, theory Y, and theory Z, where it comes to management assumptions. We'll talk in detail about all of those different theories and how they contrast between each other and where Agile fits best in those three models. The first one, this theory X, which comes from the 1880s, it has specific assumptions that are relevant to our conversation today about trust. The first assumption is that employees prefer to be controlled and directed. There's that view from management that the worker just wants to be directed into doing the work. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right? Um, and related to that, the second assumption is that employees seek security, not responsibility. Make it safe. Just simply tell me what to do, make it nice and simple, and I'll just get it done. And we'll get through the day and everybody will be happy. There's a second assumption in the Theory X model. The third one is that employees are motivated by financial rewards. And this is reminiscent of what I mentioned before about the carrot and stick model, where there's something that we can give people that will get them to do anything that we need them to do. And if the carrot is big enough, we'll get them to do anything. So that the employees are motivated by financial rewards assumption in the Theory X model. And the last two are perhaps the most important ones when in the trust from the trust perspective, which is that Theory X assumes that employees must be intimidated by managers to perform. This again comes from that task manager overpowering persona that management has carried through to present day. And in that model, it assumes that unless there is that force, employees will not perform or they will underperform. And the last one is that employees dislike work and will try to avoid it. This is a perception that employees are stealing from the company unless they're constantly supervised. And that reinforces, once again, that overpowering manager persona that is there to ensure that the employees are delivering. In other words, that they're not stealing from the company. These are the elements that are shaping the trust relationship between workers and employers, between workers and managers. And fundamentally, there is no trust. The management view assumes that we can trust workers. Unfortunately, Theory X is pretty prevalent to this day in the workplace. Many managers still subscribe to this with more positive, less positive reviews, but in general, this is a widespread held view. Um, it is not the only view. As I said, there is the Theory Y and Theory Z, which will move away from these views. However, it is quite prevalent. I wouldn't be surprised to see in the comments that in your workplace you find yourself dealing with these type of assumptions about in the workplace. This is not the way to set up a trust relationship. This is not the way to create an open space for people to just speak their mind, speak freely. We need to create the trust relationship first in order for that to happen. Many companies roll out programs that emphasize open and honest communications, yet they haven't addressed the underlying trust relationships, which makes it very difficult for people to actually be open and honest. Because it's a genuine fear: is how is my openness and my volunteering information going to be used? Will it be used against me? These are real concerns that people have and things that prevent them from being more open in their communications. When we're talking in context of an agile transformation, trust is critical. As agile coaches, we go into a workplace and we're helping people change the way that they've been doing things to something completely new. And that's really scary. As difficult, as challenging, as inefficient as the current way of doing things may be, people have survived to this point. They're still there, they still have jobs. That's something they trust, even if they dislike it, even if it's dysfunctional. They trust it because so far they've been able to survive under those conditions. When we come into the workplace as agile coaches and we start shifting things, we start helping people to change and we ask people to change the way that they're working, it's a really scary thing to do. We're literally asking people to put their jobs on the line from their perspective because it's giving up the tools that they know that have allowed them to survive to something that they don't know, they don't understand. Sometimes it's very confusing. Sometimes it's very anti-intuitive. You want me to do what? Why would I want to do that? And here's where the trust relationship with the coach is so critical. If there isn't that trust relationship with the coach, people are just not going to try it. It's too scary. And that trust doesn't come overnight. Think about your personal relationships, how you've reached the point of trusting somebody. That didn't happen overnight. That took years sometimes of constant trial and error. You try something, you see how people respond to you, and then you can have trust in them. In the workplace, building that, it also takes time. Hopefully not years, but it does take time. We need to make that investment. We need to make that effort. And an ingredient, a way to do that is to put ourselves in a vulnerable position. If we want others to trust us, we need to demonstrate that we trust them. So consider that. If you think that trust is a valuable tool to help you in your working relationships with others, then consider how you're contributing to creating that trust. How much are you putting yourself in a vulnerable position where that trust can be tested? And yes, unfortunately, sometimes we go through the test and we are disappointed. That is true. That does happen. And then we have to deal with that outcome. However, if we're never willing to make the effort and to give opportunity to find out, we'll never establish those trust relationships. We'll always be guarded. We'll always be on the expectation that something is going to surprise us. And that is going to be the impediment to have those open, honest conversations that are so critical for having effective communications. So, in trying to paint a picture where not only the words that we say, how we frame things are important and shape how people hear things, but also what we say is limited by the amount of trust that's established in our working relationships. When we have those trust relationships, we create a safe environment where we can experiment, we can innovate. Without that trust, that the failures, and there will be failures, there's inevitable. Any learning process will take time, trial and error. Try something new and see if it works. And from that experiment, learn and adapt in future iterations of trying. If there isn't trust, those failures aren't going to be used against us. We're not going to try. And there won't be innovation. We'll be stuck where we are because that's safe. You don't need to have trust, but you've already established that safety. But you also don't move from where you are if you don't do the experiments and try something new. Trust is also very important for good decision making. When we have those open discussions about reality, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then we are in a better position to make good decisions, decisions that are based on fact, decisions that are based on actual reality of what's happening, not pretty pictures that tell a story that sounds good. And unfortunately, precisely because there isn't trust in management many times, what happens is that people end up creating what I call watermelon reports. The watermelon reports are green on the outside and red on the inside. They look pretty, they convey the story that everybody wants to hear, and bravo, haha, we're all great, we're all fantastic. The reality is that the underlying facts don't reflect that green that we're seeing on those reports. It's a very common problem. I see that all the time when working with clients. So we don't want to be in that space because that leads to incorrect decisions because they were based on bad data. We want to see things exactly the way that they are. If they're great, fantastic, let's celebrate. If it's bad or ugly, let's deal with that. Let's peel the band aid and deal with the infection underneath it. Because that's going to be the fastest and the most cost effective way of working through things. That doesn't happen when there isn't a trust relationship. And this happens at all levels. It happens at the personal level. It happens all the way up to countries. When country leaders don't have the right information, they can make decisions that are fundamentally contrary to the reality of the country. It happens at all levels. This is really, really, really important. There's another aspect in agile culture that's very important, which is that of transparency. And transparency can only happen when there is that trust relationship. What we mean by transparency is we're doing work in a way that anybody at any time, doesn't matter who they are in the company, from the CEO to anybody, everybody in the company can take a look at what we're doing. And the reason to do that is not because of that overbearing manager persona that's just always watching over our shoulders for micromanagement purposes. That's not the intent. That's not the purpose. The reason for it is because it gives opportunity for everybody in the company to offer input, to help. They may see something that reminds them of their own experience, and they can offer that experience to help us in the current situation. That transparency is also something that can be used in this concept of trust and verify. There's nothing wrong with saying, I trust you, and I want to take a look at what's going on. This is just reasonable way of managing any business and any activity that we have. And in doing so, we give the opportunity for others to help us when we're transparent. If we're not transparent and we're hiding things, well, then when things go wrong, we own that 100%. We haven't given opportunity to others to help us along the way. And whatever the outcome, whether positive or negative, we own that 100%. That's too risky. I mentioned before that Agile is all about risk management, and this is part of it. When we establish the trusting relationships and we create the proper environment for testing, experimentation, and failure in a transparent way, we create the conditions for successful, good decisions, good participation from everybody who can help in the situation. When we don't do that, because there isn't trust, for example, that increases the risk. This is how we find out that we thought that we were on track, we were going to deliver, everything was looking great. And then in the last minute, we realize that we're nowhere near meeting our deliverables. That's how it happens. And there is a cycle of distrust that feeds on its own, on itself. When leadership doesn't trust the employees don't trust leadership. And many times, often because of political reasons, and oftentimes because there's sensitive information that needs to be handled carefully. I acknowledge that puts leadership in a tough position. However, people are not stupid. People can see things. People can understand what's going on, even if they don't have the details. And when we present a picture that's contrary to reality, people can give us initially the benefit of the doubt, but eventually the truth will be known. When that happens, and reality doesn't match what has been said, the party line that has been prevailing, that undermines trust. So leadership needs to be really careful in how it conducts business and doing so in the most open way possible, treating people as adults. We have to deliver that news. Let's do it in an open and honest way. If we want everybody to be open and honest in the company, we as leadership have to be open and honest as well. Again, I understand that there are limitations. I understand that this is difficult. I'm not suggesting that this is easy. And to the best of our ability, the more open and honest that we can be, the more we create the conditions for that openness and honesty to prevail in the company. And that builds the trust. That creates the trust environment, nurtures it, develops it. Otherwise, when we don't do that, what we're forcing is for people to create alternate realities that align with that party line, that align with the perceived expectations from leadership. I Many times it's happened to me that we've seen a particular dysfunction going on, and when we dig deep into what the root cause is, this is because people assumed that leadership had a specific expectation and they were just shaping everything, all of their communications and their actions to align with that expectation that they believed. But it never occurred to them to ask. It never occurred to them to pose the possibility, the question, is this what you mean? Is this what we're doing? They were afraid. There wasn't that trust relationship to seek that confirmation, the confirmation that everybody was operating under the same context. So we had that shared pool of knowledge and understanding. When we create the work environment where we're working on those alternate realities, we're creating a debt, we're mortgaging our future. And eventually, this will all lead into some type of failure. So the cost of not investing in developing, establishing and developing trust is very high. It can lead to real failures in companies and projects and relationships for sure. There's another element in agile culture that is really important, which is that of psychological safety. And psychological safety refers to not establishing this really nice kumbaya work environment where everybody is really, really, really happy and partying and everything's beautiful and we're all in this utopia. That's not psychological safety. Psychological safety actually can be really rough and uh, really sharp at times. Right? Referred to as candor is referred to as just being able to speak the truth as it is. It's good, great. And if it's not, then it isn't. And we don't have to make it pretty. We just have to be candid about it. And we can't be candid about it if there isn't psychological safety. If we don't feel psychologically safe to say things just as they are, always respectfully, that is key. In agile culture, that's key to be respectful. So we don't lose respect and we are open and candid about what's going on. That can't happen if we haven't established psychological safety. And that is born out of having trust relationships. When we trust our co-workers, our managers, the company, that they're not going to hurt us back in response to our openness, our frankness, our candidness about some things. If we don't have that established, if we don't have that trust, we're not going to do it. We're going to shape our communications in a way that's safe. And that means incomplete or inaccurate. So that psychological safety that is born out of trust allows for honest communication, risk taking, and innovation. So, in order to build this trust in agile environments, we need to really focus on that transparency that I mentioned, having that open communication, putting ourselves in a vulnerable place. A very easy way to do that is admitting mistakes. That is a really easy way to create trust relationships. I made a mistake. First of all, it's really good news to management, to leadership, because when you have somebody who is aware, self-aware enough to recognize that they made a mistake, and then on top of it has the courage to speak about it and say it, a good manager will absolutely reward, appreciate that. That nurtures their trust, even if there was a failure. When people hide things around, or they just simply not even aware that they've made a mistake, that's kind of hard to trust. When we have that trust relationship, we can then establish a very important practice in agile culture, which is that of retrospectives, having continuous feedback that lead to improvement. It is a waste of time to go through retrospectives if we don't have that trust relationship. We're just going to check the box. Yes, we got together, we talked about things. It all sounded great. Nothing changed. Rinse and repeat. It's a waste of time. We have that trust relationship. We speak honestly about the things that we need to talk about. Then change will come. Good change, improvements will come. We need to lead by example. Everybody at all levels of the organization need to engage in this practice of trust building, demonstrating trustworthiness so that we can engage all together in that trust framework. Amazing things happen when we establish that. And it takes time. It takes time. And we have to remember that building that trust is very hard. It takes time and effort. Losing it is very easy. That can happen with one communication going wrong. So we've got to be really careful every time that we speak, every time that we send a memo, every time that we have a communication. What are we saying? How are we saying it? Is this nurturing that trust relationship? It's really important. This is an investment in the future that can cost us a lot if we don't make a wise investment. So, putting it in context of AI, um, first question that would come to mind is, what does trust in AI mean? Are we talking about trusting AI? Is that part of what we need to do? And I would suggest that yes, um, especially because of the anthropomorphized relationship that we have with AIs. They're behaving more and more like humans, and they're created to behave more and more, emulate human behaviors. Yes, they become another teammate, even if they're not flesh and blood. So psychologically, while we may have awareness that we're dealing with a series of programs and algorithms and all that, there is that trust relationship. How will the AI use the information that I'm giving it? That's a very valid question. How will the company behind the AI use that information that I'm providing the AI? Well, that's a really good question. And I think that that begs the follow ons of ethical and morally appropriate behaviors exhibited by the companies producing the AIs, managing those AIs. These are things that leadership will need to take a close look at and potentially make decisions about the AI systems that they're using, whether they are nurturing that trust relationship in the company or they're not. I can envision scenarios where, just as if we had a worker that is undermining trust, that is creating, sowing the seeds of distrust and pitting people against each other and causing turmoil, just as we would look at that very carefully and make decisions around that, so must we do around AI. This is something that leadership hasn't had to deal with until now. And I would suggest that coming into the future, we will have to do that. We will need to look at AI just as any other worker because they become a part of the workforce. Are they contributing to those trust relationships? Consider that if AIs become that assistant, that helper that is going to remove a lot of the mundane aspects of work to allow humans to focus on that complex work and provide the greatest innovation and the greatest creativity, we need to be able to trust that helper with what we're handing to them. In order to have good AI human collaboration, we need to create those trust relationships. So I would encourage anybody considering and deploying AI to a company to be very open about it, to be very open and clear about how the AI works, how its information is managed, how it's fed information, how it feeds information inside of its systems. Be very transparent. Just as I talked about transparency being critical to lead us to make good decisions in the workplace, this is no different. This is part of those decisions. This is part of those relationships that we need to nurture. So we need to look at AI just like everybody else. This is another element that is going to either increase our positive working relationships in the workplace or can potentially impair them. Trust is central in an agile culture. We can't ask people to change the way that they've been working if they don't trust us to begin with. We can't make good decisions in our business if we can't trust the information that's coming to us. And that information will be flawed if we haven't created the conditions for that trust to give us the real information, the factual information, not the shaped information that is going to be well received and is going to allow us to survive the day. That's not the goal. The Agile core values and principles, all of them depend on those trusting relationships. So this really is one of those pillar fundamental ingredients to a successful assimilation of Agile in the workplace. So with that, I would encourage you to look at your work environment and consider how does your current workplace help you develop those trusting relationships? How do you contribute to that? And do you think that having those trust relationships is worthwhile? Is there something to be gained from having those relationships? So, with that, um, I'd like to invite you to join me in the comments and offer anything that you would like to share and have any questions. If you haven't, subscribe, and I will be looking forward to seeing you in future episodes. Thank you for joining me.